Hello listeners, Organauts, and welcome along to Season 2, Episode 14 of the Off the Rails podcast. I'm the offrailgamer, and I'm ready to chat video games. Well, here we are, friends, and we've survived our season of scare for another year. We find ourselves between holiday seasons, and so we can have ourselves a perfectly ordinary podcast this week. But what exactly does that mean? Well, if you're new around here, Off the Rails is a video game and video game adjacent focused podcast that goes out once a fortnight, every other Thursday, on Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube, and Castbox. I will try to get my RSS feed out to more platforms so you can listen on your preferred podcast streaming service, but some platforms make it easier to set up than others, and Apple makes their platform very inaccessible, so they'll probably be last, if ever. I started my channel on YouTube, and am slowly spreading out to other platforms. You'll find I have some presence on TikTok, and I am looking to come up with a more consistent streaming schedule there. I rarely also stream on Twitch, particularly if I'm playing something that carries any risk of a ban on TikTok. I do try to keep my content largely appropriate for all ages though. I've done being edgy in various punk bands in my youth, and now I want to offer a different kind of entertainment, and an escape from the frustrations of the modern world. We'll get nostalgic, particularly evident in Atari April, one of my personal favourite times of the year, but we also play current games, as we played through Thank Goodness You're Here and Big City Little Kitty earlier this year. Anyway, I'm sure you're eager to get on with the show, so let's grab a serving of gaming news, shall we? That's right, regulars. I'm swapping up the order a bit this week. Valve are at it again, giving away 8 games this November, for free, that you can download and keep in your library, for free. Well, are these games any good? What's on offer exactly? The games are Metastrike, a kind of COD-esque FPS from what I understand, Excommunicated, an adventure puzzle game, Sylvie's Factory, a horror title. Is there anything for someone like me in this list? Hidden Pass Skirmishes, a turn-based RPG. Small Dragon, Big Appetite, finally a game I like the sound of. President's Tower Defense, Mashbox, a sandbox game offering endless creative possibilities, and Cemetery Warrior 6, which is a Doom clone. Hogwarts Legacy is getting a sequel in Hogwarts Legacy 2, and it's considered that the new title will be set in the modern day, rather than the 1800s, as was the first game. Apparently, this has some fans online divided, but then that's true of everything these days. With so many people eager to play a sequel, it's no wonder they're all going to want different things from it. Personally, I would like to see more importance on attending classes and greater repercussions for being caught breaking curfew, as was achieved by Rockstar's Canis Canem edit. I also thought, though Hogwarts Legacy was a decent enough game, the ending just kind of fizzled out to nothing. So hopefully the second game will learn from this and give us a more climactic closing sequence. Anyway, we've newsed, so give yourself a congratulatory pat on the back for sitting through that, and let's find out what I've been playing recently. Red Dead Redemption 2 continues to occupy much of my playtime as I love to fully immerse myself into the game world and assume both the identity and also the role of Arthur Morgan, sometimes Callahan. Don't worry if you've still not played this game and have somehow managed to avoid spoilers for it. I love this game so much that it would pain me to learn that I'd ruined it for someone else. Let me just say then that a series of significant events have just unfolded and the gang have moved up to Beaver Hollow. That shouldn't mean anything to anyone who hasn't played, though anyone familiar with the timeline of events will know what I'm alluding to. I will tell you about a very cheeky chappie I met, as this is a side quest that has absolutely no bearing on the main storyline and is only a couple of missions long. Why, I was visiting Saint-Denis when I felt a terrible thirst come on, so I took myself into one of the saloons where I got talking with a very self-confident Frenchman. Charles Chatanet is a self-professed artist and whole ass. You buy him a drink, a fine brandy at that, and he tells you how he left Paris, France, to come and live in Saint-Denis. At the end of your first encounter with him, he gives you a sketch that he drew on a napkin, by way of saying thanks for the drink. He tells you to visit his exhibition in town in a few days' time. This second encounter is a lot more exciting, hard as that may be to imagine. You visit the gallery and view some pictures. As to whether they're any good, well, they do say art is subjective. And the general consensus around the room is that this art is objectionable, primarily due to the subject matter being folks in there all together. A brawl erupts, and you must throw a few punches to defend Charles from other fists a-flying. In your final encounter, Charles has made enough enemies he's decided it's time to leave town on a boat, but first he must get there. You find him in a disguise, dressed up as a lady, but full Conchita Wurst style, as he still has his full beard. You escort him to the docks. All the while he's waving at men, encouraging them to catcall him. But as he's boarding, he gets recognised by some burly men, and Arthur must throw down once again. This attracts some unwanted attention, requiring Arthur to flee from the trigger-happy police, earning himself a bounty of no less than $5 on his head. You get a letter a few days later from Charles Chatanet letting you know he's living it up in the South Pacific, where he's getting on very well with the native tribal peoples. I think Chatanet is based very loosely on Gauguin, at least in the style and subject matter of his paintings. Anyway, was it worth all that trouble when all Arthur got for it was a sketch on a napkin and a $5 bounty? Well, I suppose we got this story to tell, and what a story it truly is. So why don't you tell me what you think by writing in to offrailgamer@gmail.com. You can find that in the podcast episode description. It hasn't just been cowboys that I've been playing. I also started up a game of Cult of the Lamb. You play as a lamb that's been slaughtered. Only an ancient demon that's been restrained by chains in the underworld reawakens you to go forth into the world, slaughter the 4 bishops who took your life, and form a cult following. It's a fun little game that's part hack and slash, part camp management. When you're not off battling unholy abominations, you're giving sermons to your followers, building camp improvements like accommodation or statues to idols, and even visiting the south coast to go fishing. I won't say too much about Cult of the Lamb, but it's surely a game that we can look at together in a future season of Scare, and would you believe that's pretty much what I've been playing recently. I've also played a bit of Universe mode on WWE 2K24, as it was free with PS Plus last month, but those games haven't offered anything really new or exciting in over a decade now, so I won't bore you with the details. Hi offrailgamer, I wrote in for the first time a little while back. I don't know if you remember. I must say I was a little disappointed with this year's season of Scare on YouTube. We need to see you playing some real horror games. Anyway, I did catch up on your podcast. It's made me laugh on the bus a few times, earning me some funny looks from the other passengers. I like how you play a mix of retro and modern games on your channel. I'd love to see some more Mega Drive, like Streets of Rage, Altered Beast or Golden Axe. What consoles do you have, by the way? Do you have all the classics? Bye for now, Dunky. That is from Dunky the Moose in South Shields. Good to hear from you again. And yes, Season of Scare was a bit tame this year. I tried to do something spookier next year. I love the old Sega consoles, so more than happy to oblige on that front. As for consoles that I own, I have the Atari 2600 Plus, which plays 2600 and 7800 cartridges, Super Nintendo, Wii, Switch, PlayStation 1 through 5, Sega Master System and Mega Drive, Xbox 360, One and Series X, and the Evercade Versus. I also have some handhelds, but yeah, that's my proper console collection. I do have a couple of game sticks with access to pretty much the full NES, SNES, Master System and Mega Drive game libraries, so if there's a particular old school game you want to see, give it a shout out and I'll stick it on. Now Organauts, if you'd like to have your comment read out, just like Donkey's this week, all you need to do is email offrailgamer@gmail.com and follow my 2 golden rules. Keep it clean and don't be mean. Now, on with the show. This week, I'm going to talk about movie tie-in games. This is a class of games that can prove to be really awful, but they weren't all bad, and today I'll aim to address some of the best, and perhaps some of the worst games that the movies had to offer us. Kicking things off with the Sega Master System, gamers were treated to an experience that let them play in the world of the Terminator. Now, this game has many fans the world over, and it's no surprise. It's tough as anything, but many games were back in the day. The old cartridges could pretty much offer games that take less than an hour to complete if you were any good at them, so the difficulty was ramped up to make sure we spent longer with them, trying to beat even the first level sometimes. The Master System's The Terminator really captures the aesthetic of the film in my opinion, which is impressive given it was limited by 8-bit graphics. You play as the film's hero Kyle Reese, and start out battling T-800s in the future before travelling to the past to save Sarah Connor. There are bad guys galore to blast away in this 2D action platformer, and once you get the hang of it, you do start to feel like an action hero. It's a great game, and as movie tie-ins go, it's certainly not a bad one, which unfortunately can't be said for this next one. Asterix and Obelix Take on Caesar is a collection of mini-games. You can hunt wild boar for the village feast, or you might thump a few Romans while helping Druid Getafix harvest mistletoe in the forest. It's not terrible, and it's far from unplayable, but the fun lasts maybe half an hour or so, and it's largely forgettable. I was a huge fan of the Asterix comics as a kid, so I was eager to get this game, but all it really ended up doing was deterring me from ever watching the film, which I still haven't seen to this day. I'd have been much better off seeking out a copy of Asterix to play on my sibling's Master System 2, a game I do now have in my collection, and it's pretty good. The PS2 era probably saw more movie tie-ins than any other console generation. That would of course need to be fact-checked, but at the time it certainly seemed like if there was a film in the cinema, you could get a video game to put you in the movie. And some were pretty good. For example, I somewhat recently added Madagascar to my collection, and as it goes, it's not a bad game. The controls take a little getting used to as the camera left and right toggle is inverted, but the game itself is colourful and fun, offering enough of a challenge without proving to be explosively frustrating. At least not from the start anyway. I am yet to complete it in fairness. You start out playing as the zebra. I've not seen the films, so I don't know anyone's names. The game is a bit of a collectathon, as there are coins everywhere for you to find. Anyway, you start out exploring the zoo before leading a breakout and chasing around the city with the lion and the hippopotamus, and things of course only escalate from there. I would say the game is genuinely fun for all ages, and though it will no doubt have even greater appeal to fans of the movie, I certainly had fun playing anyway. Staying with Pixar, and staying with the PS2, The Incredibles is similarly fun. Boasting the same inverted camera controls, you get the hang of it soon enough, and it's well worth putting that effort in because this game packs an incredible amount of fun. I had seen the films before playing this title, and I had a blast, assuming the personas of Mr. Incredible, Elastigirl, et al. If you haven't already, I would seriously recommend checking both these games out. Now I want to get back to the PS1 and a game that was actually a tie-in for 3 movies. Die Hard Trilogy offers 3 games to play through, seeing you free hostages and kill terrorists in Nakatomi Plaza, Los Angeles, This probably is the most challenging. Then you can play with a light gun peripheral in the second mission, starting out gunning your way through an airport, and the final mission puts you behind the wheel of a taxi speeding around the city to try and defuse a series of bombs before the timer runs out. Die Hard Trilogy is not just a great movie tie-in game, it's a great video game, full stop, and in my opinion, it's just as much fun to play today as it ever was. Now, let's go back further in time to the Sega Mega Drive, and a game many of you may have forgotten, or the younger among you may never have even heard of. It's a tie-in with a film featuring Kurt Russell, though I wouldn't necessarily describe it as a Kurt Russell film. Oh, let's stop being so cryptic. The game is Stargate. Stargate is somewhat similar mechanically to the Terminator game I spoke of earlier, only it's Stargate, not Terminator. I have to say though, I have little idea what you're meant to do in this game, and thus far struggled to get past the third level. That's not to say it's a bad game, mind, it's just one I'm going to need to put the time into to figure out and try to get the hang of. At least it's not quite as frustrating as The Lion King. I remember seeing this game on the TV screens in Curry's or PC World when I was a kid, and being totally drawn in by its graphics, and young Simba clinging to ledges and pulling himself up as he jumped to higher platforms. I was awestruck and really wanted to play so badly for so many years. Then one day, Grown Up Off-Rail added it to his collection, and I learned what real frustration is on level 2, where you get slung about by the monkeys in the trees and battered around by the flamingos, or ricocheted off the hippos' butts down by the watering hole. Trying to get sent in the direction you actually want is a bit of a nightmare, and the nightmare continues in the ostrich level 2. If you know, you know. It's brightly coloured and beautiful to look at though, even to this day. Would I recommend you put yourself through it? Well, I certainly wouldn't warn you off of it. It's overall decent enough. I didn't have an N64 growing up, in fact I still don't have one to this day, although I would happily add it to my collection for the right price. Still, it saw the release of undoubtedly the most famous and most popular movie tie-in game. I am of course talking about 007 GoldenEye. I'm not totally oblivious to GoldenEye's charms. I was fortunate enough to play it round a friend's house back in the day. I do think it is looked at through rose-tinted glasses by many people today, but I do suppose I have my own bias, as I'm lacking any real nostalgia for the title. Also, GoldenEye was, if we're going to be honest with ourselves, Brosnan's only good Bond film. He started so strong before the writers decided to reduce him to the kind of scripts worthy of a Roger Moore Bond film. Anyway, my point being that we were given the best tie-in possible with this game. The main two takeaways that most enthusiasts will tell you is that Natalia's an absolute nightmare with a death wish worse than a lemming during that escort mission, and you're not allowed to play as Oddjob in multiplayer. GoldenEye was good for the time, but I think Time Splitters would eventually do it better. That's not a movie tie-in game though. So what's next? Well, I've got just 2 more games that I want to talk about this week. Though there are many others I could have included. Fear not though. I think the ones I'm going to give time to this week are both good uns. Starting us off then is Jurassic Park. There have been many Jurassic Park games released over the years, and this year several of those from the 8 and 16-bit era were packed into one bundle available to play on modern consoles, and it is in fact one of these that I can speak on, as growing up I had, and still have to this day in fact, Jurassic Park for the Nintendo Game Boy. It starts out in a not quite directly overhead bird's eye view. You have a rifle to defend yourself against the many dinosaurs that you'll encounter. Bullets are limited though, so you'll want to be careful not to use them all up early on. You have to search for keycards to give you access to buildings and computer systems to gain control of the park gates and get free of the enclosures you start off trapped in. But this will only unleash chaos, as you'll then need to weave between stampeding dinosaurs in what feels like a manic version of Frogger. I can't remember if you have Tim with you in this level, or if that's a later point in the game, but being a bit of a dinosaur magnet, he certainly makes things a lot tougher from memory. It's almost like he desires nothing more from life than to find out what it's like to be squished beneath the foot of a charging Triceratops. Probably not very nice, right Tim? I don't know that I ever completed Game Boy's Jurassic Park, but it's a good fun game, and it is included in the Remasters collection, so you can play it on modern hardware on the big telly if you want, and I think you should. Bah, what do I know, eh? You do you. I'm not your dad. Which leaves us our final game that I want to talk about this week. It's one that I have covered before and even devoted an entire episode to. It's also arguably the greatest movie tie-in game ever, though I concede that many gamers would grant that accolade to the aforementioned GoldenEye. And the game I've saved for last is The Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers. The best of the three films got the best video game. The Fellowship game got itself confused and turned into The Hobbit in the last level as the party fights to bring down a dragon. The Return of the King is decent enough, but the difficulty was cranked up too high. The Two Towers, on the other hand, got it just right, making you feel like a total boss, slashing your way through the armies of Moria and of Isengard. There's a bit of retconning to do from the first game, so you get to play some prominent battles from the Fellowship of the Ring, including Weathertop, where Frodo gets stabbed by the Ringwraith, Moria, where Frodo gets jabbed by the Cave Troll, and Amon Hen, where Boromir gets turned into a human pincushion courtesy of the Uruk-hai chief, Lurtz. Beyond this, you'll go on to play as either Legolas, Aragorn, or Gimli, battling your way across the plains and pillaged villages of Rohan in search of kidnapped hobbits Merry and Pippin. You'll come to the great hall of King Theoden, who, once released from Saruman's grasp, will invite you to aid him in battle at Helm's Deep. You'll kick ladders off the battlements and fight orcs, Uruk-hai, and trolls to defend the stronghold. It really is quite exciting. To finish up, though, you go to Isengard and battle your way through, I think, 20 floors of enemies. Upon doing so, you unlock Isildur as a playable character and can now select any level to replay. As you advance through the game, you earn experience points that you can use to upgrade characters, so I find it's best to stick with one and max out their weaponry to deal with the more challenging levels in the later game. I always played as Legolas, because his fire arrows are pretty well OP, even at Helm's Deep. So, there's a list of movie tie-in games for you. Have you played any of these? If so, what did you think of them? And what do you make of movie tie-in games in general? Are there some diamonds in the rough? Or should they all be cast into the fires of Mount Doom to never plague the earth again? Are there tie-ins I've not covered here that you think should have got a mention? Like the infamous Titanic. Perhaps you were hoping I'd talk about Shrek, Toy Story, or Home Alone. Whatever your opinion, I'd love to hear it, and you can share it to offrailgamer@gmail.com. If your message isn't too sweary or abusive, I might even read it out in the next Listener's Whispers. Otherwise, it is time for me to wrap things up, sadly. Thank you so much for listening. Do tell your friends about me if you've enjoyed the show, and I'll be back here, same place, in 2 weeks' time. Bye!